afternoon, everybody. Welcome back from lunch. My name's Kait Siegel. I work with the Clean Air Task Force, representing our burgeoning waste program. This afternoon, we have a great panel on policies to incentivize solutions in the waste sector and then finance for implementation. We are going to start with a presentation from the Philippines with Mr. Albert Magalang, who couldn't be here today, but has sent in a video. So I will let him get us started.
To start with, just to give you a brief background of the conceptual framework of the Republic Act that we are implementing. This is the Republic Act 9003, otherwise known as the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000. So we are dealing with 5 categories of solid waste. According to sources, like we have the household, industrial source, the institutional, commercial establishments, and agriculture. And these 5 waste categories are being treated at different levels. For example, we would like to start with separate collection, and by imposing the schedule of collected schedule of separated solid wastes, and also at the local government unit implementation, there are 2 local government units that we are looking at: the barangay, or the first one is the barangay or the community level, and then we have the city or the municipality level. So the barangay level, at the barangay level or community level, there is this mandatory establishment of materials recovery facilities of the MRF, wherein biodegradable waste and recyclable wastes are being collected, which will in turn be delivered to junk shops or recycling plants, and also to farms as regards to the biodegradable wastes. And on the city and the municipal government will be in charge with the special wastes, residual wastes, through the established treatment facilities. And of course, the endpoint is, or the final disposal facility are the sanitary landfills. So the law would also give us this overall facility based on waste management hierarchy, which I think most of us are quite familiar with this. The inverted triangle would deal with waste avoidance as the foremost priority or the most preferred options, followed by reduction, reuse, and then recycling. And then later on, as the least preferred options are the recovery, treatment, and waste safe disposal of waste. So as mentioned, we're the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act would deal with the various waste categories based on waste sources. And we have classified our waste into biodegradable, recyclable, residual waste, and special wastes. And the law would also identify the processing of this waste, from composting to MRF to SLM, sanitary landfills, and treatment facilities, that would also present various techniques and practices and technologies on how to deal with this different kinds of waste. So I would like to also mention some salient points of the Republic Act. First and foremost, there is this mandatory provision on segregation at source, and then also the collection of and transport of solid waste, segregated wastes, that will also support our recycling program. So these programs are reported regularly in the National Solid Waste Management Status Report based on the requirements um, based on the requirements that are defined by the National Solid Waste Management Framework. So these frameworks and the National Solid Waste Management Frameworks are translated into local government solid waste management plans, wherein the plans should identify the waste diversion rates and how will waste diversion will be operationalized at the local level. So this is basically the salient provision of the Solid Waste Management Act of the Philippines. And I would like to highlight this at this point, the different incentive scheme that would that are also embodied in the law. The incentive scheme that would encourage the development of outstanding and innovative projects, technologies, processes, and techniques in order to ensure that there would be reuse, recycling, and reduction of solid wastes. So we have 4 schemes under the incentive system. So we have the fiscal incentives, which would deal with tax and duty exemption of donation, legacies, and gifts for the support and maintenance of the program for effective solid waste management. So there is an exemption from all internal revenue taxes and custom duties that and shall be deductible in full from the gross income of the donor for income tax purposes. And we have also, under the fiscal incentives, we have the tax credit on domestic capital equipment, which is equivalent to 50% of the value of the national internal revenue taxes and customs duties that would have been waived on the machinery, equipment, vehicles, and spare parts. And also the last scheme under the fiscal incentives is the tax and duty exemption on imported capital equipment and vehicles. So there is there's a 10-year tax and duty-free importation of machinery, equipment, vehicles, and spare parts under spare parts that will be used for collection, transportation, segregation, recycling, reuse, and composting of solid waste. And next to the fiscal incentive are the non-fiscal incentives, which would offer a simplified procedure for the importation of equipment, spare parts, new materials, supplies for the export of processed products. And government financial institutions would also offer financial assistance program that could provide financial services, giving high priority to extend financial services to individuals, enterprises, or private entities engaged in solid waste management. And there are also grants being extended to local government units who have been commended by the Solid Waste Management Commission for adopting innovative solid waste management programs. And there are some other incentives especially to LGUs or local government units hosting waste management facilities such as sanitary landfills. And it is also worth mentioning that when this investment, the inclusion of waste management facilities or waste management projects are also included in the investment priorities plan of the Philippines, as to show that the 2020 investment priorities plan has provided green ship recycling based on international standards, for example. Okay, there are incentive programs. As I've mentioned, those incentive programs are embodied in the Solid Waste Management Act. And these are being translated into local ordinance incentives at the local level. So each city or municipality are encouraged to issue ordinance that will provide other incentives like prescribing for in order to that so that the local government units can also generate funds for its waste management projects. There are certain prescribed fees for solid waste management services that are declared by these by these ordinances. And also, as an example, cities and municipalities would also have an ordinance that would provide environmental protection and waste management code. Like for example, the incentives for using reusable bags, and also establishing point system scheme for stores or malls or other establishments that would that would encourage the use of reusable shopping bags, and also green lanes in stores that could provide special counters or express lanes to be called as green lanes that will cater to customers using reusable bags. Okay, further on the financing solid waste management, the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of the Philippines would also provide a solid waste management fund. So these are generated from the fines and penalties imposed or the proceeds of permits and licenses issued by the department or the Department of Environment and Natural Resources under this act. Also, the fund would also include donations, endowments, grants, and contributions from domestic and foreign sources. So the local government units are entitled to avail of this fund on the basis of their approved solid waste management plan. And I think, and I guess it's worth mentioning that we have already passed a law pertaining to extended producer responsibility on plastic packaging waste. And to some extent, this would also amend some portions of the Republic Act 9003 or the Ecological Solid Waste Management Act of 2000. So I would also like to mention some provisions of the law that would deal with open burning of municipal solid wastes, including agricultural waste, because this has been our basis for the national strategy on methane reduction from municipal solid waste, which wherein we were able to get support from the Clean Air and Climate and Clean Air Coalition. So the open burning concerns are also embodied in the law. In fact, it is one of the prohibited acts under the penal provisions. So as I mentioned, we were able to come up with a national strategy to reduce short-lived climate pollutants from solid waste sector in the Philippines by addressing the open burning. So we were able to come up with numbers. As for example, we were able to determine that open burning or unmanaged dam sites has been found to be the major source of black carbon. And then and also we were able to determine the climate impact due to black carbon emissions from burning, which would also be which would also could provide us the baseline for future projects that would be needing this baseline data. So as regards to, as I've mentioned, this national strategy to reduce short-lived climate pollutants from municipal solid waste sector in the Philippines has materialized because of the cooperation from other agencies, international partners like the IGES of Japan, and of course the Clean Air and Climate Coalition. So we are now as part of the national strategy. We are also implementing the best available techniques and best environmental practices to prevent and control open burning at backyard or communal areas. And also, this strategy would also enable us to increase waste collection coverage and frequency. So we have to engage the public support also against backyard burning, and also to enhance residual waste collection coverage and frequency to discourage backyard burning. So that's all, colleagues. Thank you so much for this opportunity, and please feel free to raise your questions, and I will. I hope that I would be able to provide the answers to that. Thank you so much, and pleasant afternoon once again to everyone.
All right, so Albert was actually not able to join us for questions, I think due to some technical difficulties, and it's also about 2:30 in the morning in the Philippines. But so we're going to move on to our next set of presenters. We have some joint cooperation going on this session from a bunch of our panelists. So I would like to introduce Brooke Shaffer from the Center for Clean Air Policy and Gerardo Canales from Implementa SOAR, who are going to be telling us about the Peru Nama Facility Organic Waste Management Project.
Thank you, Kate. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. Gerardo and I will be collaborating on this PowerPoint as we collaborate with many things, including on what I'm presenting today, which is the Peru Waste Nama. Namas are holistic approaches to accelerating finance for low carbon technologies. This one is specifically focused on Peru and specifically focused on the waste sector. So today, in terms of the agenda, what we're going to focus on is, first I'm going to tell you a little bit about the company I work for, CCAP, our approach, the lessons we've learned through our work, and then Gerardo will jump into specifics on the Peru Nama, and what I think might be especially interesting for this session, which is talking about the financial mechanism to essentially bring additional financing and more competitive financing that's below market rates to these types of projects. So first, a little bit about the Center for Clean Air Policy. We are a think and do tank. So basically, we provide thought leadership on issues that we're facing in terms of climate change, how to help countries achieve their NDCs, and essentially how to translate those into specific projects that reduce emissions across sectors. The sectors that we focus on are energy, waste, and transportation. I myself am specifically focused on the waste sector. I think that's enough for this slide. In terms of how our program came about, I think it's interesting to follow the history. We've been working in the waste sector for about 10 years now. How we got there is that we were initially working with countries across Southeast Asia, as well as Latin America, on something called the Mitigation Action Implementation Network, or MAIN. And what we were doing is bringing stakeholders together from ministries of environment and ministries of finance to talk about NDC implementation and how they can reduce emissions, specifically through NAMAs, nationally appropriate mitigation actions. Based on those meetings, a number of countries asked us to focus specifically on the waste sector. And so that's exactly what we did. And we gained experience in working on waste projects on the ground, as well as on policy at the national level. And as a product of that, the CCAC asked us to be part of the Waste Initiative Steering Committee. We developed strategies and pre-feasibility studies for projects. This includes anaerobic digestion, compost, and also landfill gas capture, and landfill gas to energy. And we created something called the Latin America Waste Network through the CCAC, the South America City Waste Network. I'm sure Sandra would correct me on that. And we were ultimately successful in bringing these projects to finance. And so we were able to achieve getting climate finance to support these projects, both through GCF funding for the Colombia Waste NAMA, and this is readiness funding to kind of further develop the proposal, and also of the Peru NAMA through the NAMA facility, which we'll talk about today. In terms of where our lessons learned came from, a lot of them came from this network of cities and municipalities that we worked with across South America. Some of you are in this picture here where we launched the program. I know Sandra is, Gerardo is, Magda is. And we worked with 23 cities from across Latin America, as well as the largest capitals in these countries. So Buenos Aires, Rio, Santiago, Bogota, Quito. And the goal was to basically foster South-South learning and collaboration. So cities would share with each other what are the issues that they're facing, what are the barriers to getting these projects implemented, and how they can overcome them. They not only shared successes, they also shared failures, what's not working, which you can often learn from even more than successes. Based on these, we were able to find out what were priority topics for these cities and municipalities in order to develop projects. And these are listed here. So one was communication strategies. A key issue, and we all know this, is separation at source in order for these projects to be successful. So how can you engage citizens to better separate at source? Awareness campaigns, and how can you change that fundamental behavior? We even struggle with that here in the United States, but there are many successful examples, including some that Gerardo can mention from Chile and the Recicla Orgánicos program. Another thing was building capacity at the municipal level to essentially be able to do pre-feasibilities themselves. So it's not just us coming in and saying, this is how, basically, this is what a project will cost for this technology. These are the revenues you can expect to receive, and these are your costs in terms of CapEx and OpEx. But also teaching them to use the tools so that they can do these themselves. And finally, how you do financing and cost recovery. So a big issue in a developing country context, especially, is that the waste services are often not paid for by citizens, and so that the tipping fees are very low, and it makes it difficult for cost recovery to cover the costs of the actual projects. And so it means that the technologies that are available at a developing country level vary by country, but something like anaerobic digestion can sometimes be prohibitively expensive unless the right incentives, financing, and regulatory framework are in place. And that's what we're going to talk about more today. So this is to talk about our approach. Basically, this follows project implementation from the inception of the idea for the project, so identifying project through the pre-feasibility analysis all the way to implementation. We have gone through this process with individual projects in different countries. And what we've learned is that by focusing on the project level, you can find out and inform at the regulatory level what changes need to happen, right? So one very basic example, and Gerardo can get into this more with the Peru NAMA and how we're applying this in the Peru context. But essentially, in Peru, for example, municipalities who are responsible for waste management are not able to sell the byproducts of the process. So they are not legally allowed to make a profit, and they cannot sell the compost. If they can't sell the compost, it means that they cannot essentially receive revenues in order to cover the cost of operation, and that means that these projects need to be subsidized. Now that's something that can be easily changed by changing the regulatory context and saying that municipalities can sell these if it provides a public benefit. And so that's, one of the key changes that one of many that we're proposing in Peru. In terms of our approach, I really like this diagram. We call it the 3 legs of the stool. And it basically shares that in order to accelerate implementation of projects in the waste sector that reduce methane emissions, you can't just focus on one thing. You need to focus on the policy and regulatory framework in order to provide the incentives, in order to provide the mandates that make these technologies bankable in the country. You need to find a pipeline of projects that you can then invest in. And you need to do pre-feasibility analyses for these projects. And finally, through a financial mechanism, you can have the financing in order to implement them at preferable rates, because it's something that's within the country's interest and within our interest as a global community to reduce these emissions. In terms of the regulatory analysis, so what we've learned in terms of what you can change in terms of the regulatory environment to improve implementation of these projects, I will not go through these one by one, but I'm sure this will be shared with you afterwards. Just to give one example, this is the lack of regulatory framework for selling of byproducts, and you can essentially modify the laws so that you can sell directly to industry. Another example, just to give an example, is basically certification schemes. So if a country doesn't have a market, say for compost or for digestate, that makes it very difficult in order to receive revenue from the selling of these byproducts. And you can help overcome that both through awareness campaigns as well as through certifications to ensure a minimum quality of the product so that you can build trust in it. One of the major issues and concerns is if you develop a project without these regulations in place, you can then essentially have byproducts that are of low quality, and that completely undermines the project and the market, and it becomes very difficult to implement these projects in that country. In terms of an economic analysis, one example here that I'd like to share is guarantee funds. So there can be a, especially within the banking community, both development banks as well as the local banking community in countries, there's a high risk perception with regards to methane reducing projects in developing countries. And one of the ways that you can help overcome that, one is through pilot projects, but another is through guarantee funds, where essentially you can help protect from first loss. And so you set aside money that would cover the first loss of a project that would allow the local banking sector to feel more comfortable investing in that type of technology for the first time for them in this context. In terms of the barrier analysis on the technical side, this is self-explanatory. But essentially what Gerardo will share and what the NAMA gets into is that there is technical capacity often at the national level and at the municipal level in terms of capital cities. But at the municipal level, it can be, there's not the same knowledge and expertise there is in terms of landfilling, right? But in terms of these methane reducing technologies, there's not the same level of knowledge. And so building capacity so that municipalities can do these pre-feasibility studies so that they can have a sense of essentially what the technological options are to reduce emissions can be extremely helpful. And finally, getting into the Peru NAMA, we took all of these lessons learned that we've developed over a decade of working at the country level, both on projects on the ground with individual cities and municipalities, as well as with project developers, as well as on regulation at the national level. And we've applied them to the Peru Waste NAMA. And this, we submitted an application to something called the NAMA facility, which is essentially a smaller GCF. It actually predates the GCF, and the GCF was in part replicative of the NAMA facility. So you can think of the NAMA facility as like a pilot for the GCF. So we were able to submit a successful application to the NAMA facility for 20 million euros to develop this program in Peru. It has potential for regional replication and the potential to reduce 25 million tons of CO2 equivalent, mainly through methane reduction, over the next 20 years. And now Gerardo can share more specifically about that program. Just to share maybe two things. One is that we were one project out of I think 5 that were selected out of more than 58 projects submitted to this round of the NAMA facility, and that it's the only one from this round in Latin America and one of the only ones in waste. So one of the big barriers that we face is kind of this risk perception. So I want to applaud the NAMA facility for essentially starting to invest in developing countries in reducing emissions from the waste sector, which is something that we really need to target and get more development banks to do moving forward. So now, without further ado, I'll pass it on to Gerardo, who can share more specifics about what we're focusing on in Peru. Thank you.
Gracias, Brooks. I know we are super past on time, so I'm going to be quick. But yeah, as Brooks said, we are in the detailed preparation phase. So next, we have until June next year to prepare all the details of the implementation of the NAMA. I think that was also a lesson learned from the NAMA facility, because the NAMAs used to start, but then the financial mechanism normally takes a long time to be, to get it ready to operate. So now we have this preparation phase, which is around a year and a half. And I think it's gonna get us ready when we have to start. Actually, yesterday or 2 days ago, we finally found the financial intermediary in Peru, which is gonna be COFIDE, a local development bank. So they are gonna be the intermediaries for the NAMA. Yeah, just to show you that we are following this approach. So in order to improve the policy framework, the financial mechanisms, and to create the pipeline of projects. So the NAMA basically consists on a series of activities that are attacking each of these issues. The NAMA has 2 main lines of work, a technical component and a financial component. So out of the 20 million euros that we are going to spend on this initiative, 5 are going to the technical component and 15 to the financial mechanism. And these are all the institutions involved. And yeah, this is the financial implementing partner is what we just agreed yesterday. What kind of projects we are going to promote? So landfill gas to energy. That's really the 80% of the emission reductions that we can get. So we know that this is a long-term race. We need to take care of the methane that's coming out of the landfills now, and at the same time start diverting organic waste out of the landfill. So we need to focus on landfills. Peru is building a lot of new landfills right now, which is a good news, but we need to incorporate landfill gas collection and destruction for those sites. And at the same time, promote composting and anaerobic digestion. This program is going to work with private and public projects, so it's not only municipal projects. Yeah, in terms of the technical component, the main focus is on creating the project pipeline. I think that's the big challenge, to find the right projects, to work with the developers, with the private sector, with the municipalities. So we are expecting to find around 40 projects. Out of those, only 25%, 10 projects probably will get funding from the NAMA facility. But the idea is that after these 4 years, this portfolio remains and someone takes over and they can be implemented afterwards. Working on regulations, capacity building for the private sector and also for the government. MRV, of course, installing an MRV structure in the country. I don't know, developing MRV protocols for composting, for landfill gas, for anaerobic digestion. So the country has like a tailor-made methodology to estimate their emissions. That it's basically an existing standard like CDM, for instance, but with a little adaptation to the local conditions. So it's not something really completely new, but it's an adaptation to the local conditions of the country. And of course, education and communication material for the community as a whole. The financial mechanism basically divided in 2 phases. The first phase, some funding will be spent on providing debt to the projects, like low interest debt. It will be complemented by also loans coming from other financial institutions that could be commercial banks or development banks. So the NAMA fund is not able to provide all the financing for the project. So we will need to go out there and find partners to get all the funding that we need. And then in a second phase, we are planning to establish a guarantee fund. this financial mechanism under the NAMA, it's only 4 or 5 years. But the idea is that some financial institution that we don't know yet who is going to be receives the payments from the loans after these 5 years and keeps financing further projects. So that's why we are building this portfolio that it's larger than the 10 or 12 projects that we can fund in this period in order to create like a long-term pipeline for the country. Yeah, so this is basically like a summary of what we are expecting. These 8 projects are for the first phase. This is not written in stone. It could be 6 composting plants. It will depend on the size and different characteristics. So we're not close to that. But just to have like an idea, an initial idea of what it's going to be, this is what we are looking at. And the emission reductions that we are projecting along the time, hopefully to contribute with around 5% of the mitigation goals of the country. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gerardo and Brooks. We're definitely already over time, but I would like to give an opportunity for one question now, and then maybe if we have time at the end, we can invite all our panelists back up and go a little bit more in depth. So, yeah.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this fantastic presentation. Jean-Baptiste Demba, part of IFC, the World Bank Group, Global Waste. We finance projects and companies across the waste value chain. My question for you is, why did you choose to focus on a lot of small projects instead of choosing maybe a smaller number of projects, but bigger ones? Thank you.
Yep, it's working. Yeah. I don't think they are small. I mean, 3 megawatts from a landfill gas for landfill gas generation is not that small. It's well, it depends on the conditions of the country. Peru doesn't have too many big landfills, so basically that scale was selected thinking about which landfills are still lacking landfill gas collection. And basically, that's the capacity that we got. There are successful landfill gas projects in Latin America that generate 1 megawatt, and they are economically feasible. So yeah, I mean, and the main idea is to really through this process to prove different strategies. So we also would like to install in the country knowledge, capacities around a series of technologies. For example, we don't have it here, but probably we will promote home composting. Home composting is the cheapest alternative for the municipality. I mean, they will spend $100 per composter, some capacity building, and in the long term, basically they will be collecting 50% less of the waste from that household in the long term. So maybe 10% of the population is willing to do that, 15%, we don't know, but it's part of like a portfolio of solutions that we would like to implement. So and also we expect to leverage further funding. I mean, this program, the idea is to prove the concept, to create good conditions in the country, and hopefully development banks will also contribute to finance more projects. I mean, this is just a small piece. As I said, we are estimating that we will contribute like 5% of the mitigation goals for the waste sector in Peru. So there is a lot of work to do more.
Sorry, just to complement that with one thing. So we maxed out what we could ask from the NAMA facility, right? So this is what we could do with the 20 million that you can put forward on this. And the second thing, in terms of like why many projects instead of just there needs to be a focus. Like there are many examples of one-off projects that happen in like the largest population area, you know, like in the capital city. But what we are really trying to focus on is transforming the sector. And so not just focusing on one large population center, but having projects that are locally appropriate and based around the country. And so that's why some of them are smaller, because they're in parts of Peru where the population is smaller, but where we still want to showcase and help change behaviors and help people understand that like you can reduce methane emissions through these types of technologies.
Yeah, and maybe to add to that question of yours, the NAMA facility finances projects which are largely super innovative and different from what the banking sector would take. And so the proposal to have smaller units and look into this innovative finance mechanism was one of the reasons why they were selected. They are the 5th project the NAMA facility has taken in the waste sector. So just to add to that, that concept is innovative and is looking into providing a framework which hopefully later on can be taken up by the larger banks, which you're coming from.
And we're back on. All right. Thank you both so much. Next, it's my pleasure to bring Magda Correal from the Inter-American Development Bank up to continue talking about transforming the waste sector.
Thank you, Kate. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, CCAC and GMI for this invitation to share with you some ideas and what we are doing in the Inter-American Development Bank. I work there. I joined the bank 2 years ago, and I work there as a solid waste management specialist in the Water and Sanitation Division. I want to share with you 3 key messages. The first one, I want to talk to you about a recent study that we made about how much funds are needed in the region to improve the waste management in the Latin American and the Caribbean region. The second part of my presentation, I want to relevate to highlight the importance of the operational expenditures to make feasible and to make sustainable the projects in the region. And finally, I want to share with you what we are doing in this moment in the waste sector as a bank. The title of my presentation is because right now we are working on guidelines, an internal guidelines, when we want to introduce and promote the circular economy in the waste sector and accelerate the transformation of this sector. Just a very brief summary in the region. We produce around 230 million tons of waste per year. 96% of those waste goes to dump sites or landfills. Around 40% goes to dump sites or open dump sites or controlled dump sites. And only 4% of those waste are recycled or recovered or reused. And we also have problems, a weak capacity, institutional capacity that we need to improve to provide a better waste management service. This is the result of the study. We found that the region needs around 14,000 million per year to improve the waste management in the Latin American and the Caribbean region. We assume some goals to this study. We propose some goals, and we propose to improve or to increase the valorization, the recycling, the composting, and our digestion, in general terms, the valorization of the waste, moving from 4% that our current situation to a 30%, at least to a 30%, closing all open dam sites and the control dam sites in the 2030 year. And the rest of the waste that we cannot valorize or reuse, at least that goes to a engineered landfill. So this is the result of this study. What I want to highlight is that around 70% of those expenses are operational. So we need to work on improving the revenues and the funds to cover those operational expenditures. It is not enough to have the capex to cover the investment, because we have seen, unfortunately, many projects that are built and then are abandoned after 1 year or a couple of years. So I want to remark this point. Second one is a very typical topic that I used to share in many of my presentations about the recovery mechanisms. This is just a very brief summary. We want to talk in another opportunity in more detail about this. But what I want to show is what we call now a low level equilibrium. I don't know how to translate well. But what I want to mean is that in the current situation, the quality of the service is very low. Most of the waste goes to dam sites, etc. So the quality is very low, but it is absolutely related to the funds that are available to provide the service. So we need to improve the revenues for the waste sector, promoting the use or the use of fees, of tariff, or different revenues where the generators of the waste have to pay for this service that is provided by the municipality. So we need to improve. This is the purpose of showing this, to increase this participation of the tariff in terms of the revenue, and to look for other sources of financing. For example, with the extended producer responsibility mechanisms, to have some funds or some finance funds, to cover part of the cost of the waste management, to be able of improving the service. I want to share a couple of examples related to this. One is in Colombia. In Colombia, for more than 20 years, they have a tariff that is paid by the users. It is collected with the electricity or the water supply service. The recovery is very high. The revenue, it covers around 95%, or in some cities, in the biggest cities, the tariff covers 100% of the cost of the service, not only the operational, but also the investment, and including in also a tariff for the we call the tarifa of the aprovechamiento, of a kind of reuse or recycling tariff. It's better to say that, a recycling tariff. Yeah, it is paid to the waste pickers that are in a process of formalization, but the tariff paid by the households and the industry, etc., include a tariff for the recyclers and the recycling activity. Another example that I want to share with you very briefly is a trust that was created recently in Dominicana, in Dominican Republic, in the new law of waste management that was issued in 2020. They include a trust specifically for the waste management sector, that all companies, or public and private companies, has to pay based on the revenues that they receive, and they have to it's a kind of a tax that have to go to this trust, and those funds will be used for improving the waste management. Now I want to share with you what we are doing as an Inter-American Development Bank. As you know, we provide finance in the region. Our clients are 26 countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. However, we have 48 shareholders, including the United States and countries from Europe and Japan and China and among others. But our clients are the Latin American countries and the Caribbean. In this moment, in the waste sector, we have 17 operations, a portfolio of 17 operations in 10 countries. Probably the most relevant operation that we have in this moment. One is in Argentina. It was approved 2 months ago. The purpose of this loan is to finance the construction of environmental, they call centers, that includes a sanitary landfill, a composting plant, and recovery material facility. We are financing those facilities in different areas in the country. We are starting the operation in this moment, and we are working also in another operation in Dominican Republic to close the largest dam site in the country, and still I think this is the largest dam site in the whole continent. It receives around 4,000 tons per day, and we are working in closing this place in the following 4 years. This is probably the most relevant operation that we have in this moment. But we also provide technical cooperation. Those are non-reimbursable funds to prepare the plans, the studies and the pre-feasibility and feasibility and designs studies to the preparation of the projects, and also to provide resources to the governments to strengthening their capacities in terms of preparation of plans or regulations, etc. I want to remark that 100% of our operations from the next year have to be aligned with the Paris Agreement. It is very, very important. All the multilateral development banks are committed with this proposal. So it will help a lot to promote the fulfillment of this agreement in the region. Also, another initiative that we are working on, I want to highlight the Regional Waste Hub, where we are collecting information of each country about waste management, current state of the art, the general figures about the amount of waste that they are producing, if they goes to a landfill, to a dam site, etc. The emissions that produce in this that are producing in this sector. We hope to publish this or to launch this hub at the beginning of the next year. Also, we are working on other initiatives. These are 2 facilities that we call Too Good to Waste, and another one, an accelerator on circular economy, to canalize some funds from donors and to help those donors to place those funds in the region as a kind of a non-reimbursable funds to prepare the projects, etc. The time is over, so I want to move to the last slide. You can scan this QR where you can find all the information about this operation in Argentina. It is for $137 million. It is very, very interesting that you can find all the information, the technical analysis, the environmental and the social analysis, the financial, economical, and all the documents that describe these type of operations that we do in the region. And finally, I would like to share with you or invite you to scan also this blog that we recently published with Carolina, that is here also, about the polluters pay principle in Latin America and the importance of introducing this concept in the region. And finally, a publication that we issued in a couple of months ago about a general concept related to valorization of waste management in the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Magda. Again, we have time for about one question. Anja has one if everyone else.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Magda, thank you for the interesting presentation and highlighting the need for finance and especially polluter pay principle. I have one question, which you have a 2023 goal on financing related to climate change issues, but you also present that you continue financing new landfills. So landfills are the major source of methane. How does these two things go together? So where, for me, is the question, where's the priority in financing then, if this is the major goal of the bank? Yeah, to really evaluate the climate change issues. Yeah. Do you have a priority of diversion or anything?
Thank you. We have a new guidelines that describes how to consider a project that is aligned with the Paris Agreement. There are some kind of project specifically in the waste sector. There are some facilities such as, for example, composting plants, anaerobic digestion plants that are considered automatically aligned with the Paris Agreement. However, for example, the landfills requires an additional analysis. So the bank doesn't consider automatically align those investments with the Paris Agreement. We have to do an additional analysis. And for example, one of the rules are if the landfill is for a population of 300,000 inhabitants, it should include a capture, an active capture system, and at least a flare system of the emissions in this landfill. This is one of the conditions that I don't know if I'm briefly explaining you that we are moving in that way. We do not consider landfills as an investment that we can do in the coming years automatically. We need to provide an additional analysis considering those criteria. Now, this is one of the criteria that I mentioned, but there are another other criteria to have in mind.
Great. Thank you so much to my first set of panelists today. Now we're going to switch it up and bring Anja Schwetje and Bergerus-Rensvik, as well as Giulia Ceccarelli, to talk to us more about Europe and then financing on the global scale.
So, yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, me and my colleague, we will try to make up some time. So we will skip one or two slides. We've been introduced kindly already. Are you planning to introduce yourself again? No. Okay, so please. So this slide, I have to ask you to click. It's animated. One moment, not so quickly. Okay, so yeah. I'm not sure. So the point is really, what we just heard from our previous speaker, and that's also related with the question I had, we want to transform the waste sector. And that is one point, and we want to transform it in an environmentally friendly way. So it is a sector which is generation driven. That means the municipality has to deal with the waste every moment, and it's occurring every moment. So how to transform something which is constantly in full flow? That's not easy, definitely. We have the sanitation and the public health aspect, and the fact that we have national legislation, but the implementation is a public domain of the local governments. So now we heard about landfills or dump sites. For us, from the government perspective, when you want to avoid methane, they are equally difficult. So usually what happens, because of the size of the projects required by the banks often, and also of the mindset, very often a landfill and a dump site is closed, and it's substituted by probably, hopefully, a landfill with a landfill gas project. Yeah, and this is what we see mostly occurring. Click, please. But when we look into what happens with landfills, landfills generate methane for 50 years to come after they are closed. Yeah, so you have a long aftercare phase here, which usually is not taken into account. Yeah, we can capture maximum 50% of the landfill gas, because in the initial filling phase, we cannot capture everything. We have problems, and especially in the run-out phase, we have problems to capture that methane. So looking only from the climate perspective now, and this is actually our job here, as we are the Climate and Clean Air Coalition a bit, is it so sensible to substitute a landfill with another landfill? Yeah, when we come to organic waste, is landfilling of organic waste something we should do when it generates the methane in the landfill? And this is why we call on sector transformation, in a sense, as the waste hub, that we say we need to divert the organic waste. We need to get the organic waste out of the landfill. We don't say landfilling itself shouldn't exist anymore, because the truth is, in Germany, we still have landfills. But a landfill with inert waste inside doesn't have the leachate, doesn't have the odor, doesn't have the environmental problems, and doesn't have the methane. Yeah. So the more we drive the landfill content towards something which is not reactive, the better we are with not only the methane emissions, but also with the costs and with the other environmental impacts. So we need, of course, an industry around that. We need probably separate or mixed waste collection. And that is the transformation part, which is really hard. And this means that biogas plants or composting plants, and that was the question of the colleague before, they are small in size and they're not really interesting for the big finance sector. Yeah, and this is why also I'm happy that we have the NAMA project, which tries really to kind of provide a financial scheme and a viable way forward with the transformatory projects. So we would like now to show you the impact of this transformation, which Åsa and me, we already experienced that in our countries. And we start with my colleague in Sweden. And the food waste avoidance, if you click again, it should come, is of course also an interesting component and really important. Next slide, please.
Thank you. So if we look at this picture, is illustrating our treatment on municipal solid waste from 1975 until today. And as you can see, we are going from landfilling towards material recycling and incineration. And if we were looking back almost 50 years, the main treatment was landfilling. And during the 70s, our government realized that this is going to be problematic, and they start implementing policies to steer the waste management towards material recycling, biological treatment, and incineration or energy recovery. And today we have approximately 0.9% landfilling of our household waste, and it's inert waste. It's all other waste is recycled or organic treated or incinerated. And we have a big part that is incinerated, 50%. And we are recover energy from it. And 21% of our district heating is from waste incineration. And we are heated approximately 800 households with waste and produce electricity for about 250,000 households. And we also have a biological treatment. It's about 15% today. And we are mainly doing anaerobical digestion. And we also are, of course, getting fertilizer. And the biogas that we get, we are upgrading to vehicle fuel, and the biofertilizer is going back to the agricultural land. And we also have material recycling is about 34%. And we also look at instruments that we have been using. In the late 80s, we got through tough requirements for flue gas from incineration of waste. And this was the toughest requirements in the world, but it also enabled incineration to expand. And we also introduced the local waste management planning since 1991. So all municipals in Sweden has to do a municipal waste management plan. And this have requirements of I lost it. Sorry. Goals and for the municipals to improve the waste management in local level. Sorry about that. And we also have tax on landfilling since 1999. And when it started, it was about 25 euro per ton landfilled waste. And now it's about 50 euro per ton waste. We have been working with bans on landfilling for combustible waste and organic waste since 2000. And we had the extended responsibility since 1994, and we have 9 different groups today. And the first one was packaging and return paper. And we had a lot of positive grants, not only bans and taxes to improve the waste treatment. So for most of our biogas plants today that produce biogas from waste had some kind of grants to be able to produce biogas. And they also have a tax reduction on the vehicle fuel if they upgrade the biogas to vehicle fuel. So if you look at the greenhouse gas emissions from waste treatment, you can see a correlation between our instruments that we've been using to reduce landfilling and to recycle and treat waste in a good order. And you can see that this line is the release of the greenhouse emissions, and this is the tons. And 2/3 of our emissions have since 1990 reduced in the amount of. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Too confused.
No, don't worry. So, I mean, you look at Sweden here, and how many inhabitants?
Oh, sorry, we have about 9 million inhabitants in Sweden compared to Germany.
Yeah, so Sweden has 9 million inhabitants, and Germany has more than 70 million. So, the curve which you look at is the same. Yeah, it's only the amount is bigger. Yeah, but the reduction effect is the same, and the reduction is largely, and you can see that that's our IPCC reporting. It's largely driven by not landfilling anymore organic waste. Yeah, and the small amount here, the dark blue, which you see here, and you can see that also in relation. In the Swedish part, these are the emissions of the biological treatments. Yeah, so you replace an enormous green bar with a relatively small blue bar when you do the diversion. And I think this is that's the kind of message we want to transmit, and you need instruments for that. Very clear. Can you give me the next slide? So when you look here, the same as Sweden, we decided very early to stop landfilling the organic waste. So we had in 1993 already a law which said that in 2005 we practically will have a landfill ban for the organic waste. Yeah, and what happens is the industry changed. New plants came up, and they came up before that period. And as you see here, the emissions in total go down, and they go down because the generation in the landfill body goes down. The capture rate, which we have, and we have landfill gas capturing in all our landfills. The capture rate, the influence is insignificant compared to stopping to landfill organic waste. Can you give me next slide? And this has been, next slide, has been done by next slide, we cannot talk about that. That has been, sorry, yeah, no time. That has been basically done by not allowing the municipalities to landfill anymore. And I want to show this picture because it relates to what my colleague from the bank says, Magda said. It's super important that, and that Sweden and Germany are alike in that we have the gate fee, we use the extended producer responsibility to pay a part of the waste management costs. But we also don't have heavy subsidies on fertilizer or fuels, for example. On the contrary, we try to subsidize or support the production from renewable sources. Yeah, and this is probably very important because that's a barrier. And we take a lot of income as well to drive down the costs by sales of equipment, sales of material. Yeah, and it's also selling compost or biogas. Next slide. Next slide. So if you take a look, this would be our recommendations. Make landfill more expensive. Try to ban the organic part from the landfill so you can get a real change, because if this is not there, how will a municipality be able to justify what they're doing if the framework is not there? So look into having the according support programs, but that was all mentioned. And so here we conclude. And thank you very much. No, we won't go into that. You don't have time. Thank you very much. And we hope it was interesting for you, and you want to leave some space for our colleague from the World Biogas Association, I guess.
Yeah, thank you so much. And also thank you for being time sensitive. So I guess I'll say that we'll skip questions for now so that we can get Giulia up here to speak, but I will volunteer Anja and Åsa to stay behind and answer questions afterwards if anyone has them. Change slide.
Hi, everyone. I'll try to be as quick as I can. I'm Giulia from the World Biogas Association. So just quickly, the WBA is the Global Trade Association for biogas, landfill, and anaerobic digestion sectors. And we were founded in 2016 by the national associations of the UK, Italy, the US, and 20 founding companies. Today, we represent about 100 organizations from around the world, and that includes over 30 national associations. I'm gonna change the slide. It's this one, sorry. It's not changing. Can you change it? Sorry. So everyone in this room, the other slide, one before. Everyone in this room would agree that waste and agriculture are critical sectors to deliver the global methane pledge, but this is often not the case. So the WBA will be launching a methane pamphlet that looks exactly at organic waste and their role in delivering the pledge. So some of these slides, the initial slides, are taken from that pamphlet. And this initial slide, it's really there to show that, manure management, municipal solid waste, which we're talking about today, and wastewater have a huge role to play in delivering that pledge, and they represent 19% of the man-made methane emissions globally. So it's a huge part of those methane emissions. Indeed, humans generate over 105 billion tons of organic waste every year, which is a really big amount. And we need to do something with these wastes. And obviously, biogas can recycle them into bioresources that we can use to, displace fossil fuels, displace fossil fertilizers and others products. Next slide. This slide really is there to show where the methane emissions from organic waste are concentrated. It's obviously a global issue, but as you can see, a lot of it also comes from the global north, where countries should have the capacity, the financing to take care of those methane emissions. So there is more that we need to do. And at the moment, only 2% of organic waste are recycled and treated globally. So there's a lot to do there. This mic now works. Next slide, please. And again, WBA has used its own modeling to estimate the potential of biogas and AD in delivering the global methane pledge. And we realized that we could do almost 50% of, sorry. I think that's wrong. I just realized I think the slide is wrong. It's 50% of the global methane pledge globally, and that means we need to be doing more in these critical sectors. But really, what I'm talking today about is how cities have been doing that, have been successful in diverting organic waste from landfill and recycling them through biogas. So I've brought a couple of case studies. Okay, next slide. A couple of case studies that look at the finance models that some of the cities have used and have been successful. So the first case study is from the city of Milan in Italy, hugely successful in diverting organic waste and treating them through biogas. But only in 2011, the city wasn't doing that well with their recycling rates. And many of the recycling was actually dry recyclables. In 2012, they decided to do something about that, and they improved their planning and they improved their collection and really focused on organic waste. And in about a couple of years, they were able to collect over 90 kilograms of waste per resident each year, which brought a huge CO2 reduction and methane reductions. So currently the citizens collect their food waste in compostable bags, they are picked up twice at a curbside, twice weekly at a curbside. And then this waste is brought to the anaerobic digestion and composting facility to be recycled. How did they finance this project? The city financed it and spent 4.5 million euros to buy 45 vehicles for the collections and other equipment for the collection. And a part of that funding also was used to give citizens the delivery bins, baskets, and also the liners, the compostable liners, and an instruction leaflet on how to recycle. How they were able to get their investment back? So the payback was planned via waste management fee, which had a fixed component. About 70% was based on the size of the flats, the building, and another 30% was a variable component that was based on the number of people that were living there. And the price of collection varied between 150 to 300 euros per ton of collected waste. And that also depends on the size and location. The gate fee that is charged by the biogas plant is between 50 and 80 euros per ton of waste, and also depends on the biogas potential of the organic waste that they receive. And the compost and digestate is then sold to farmers for 20 to 50 euros per ton, depending on the quality of the product. So the better the product is, the more they can get, they can sell it for. And also, it's really important to note here that because the reduction in the waste that was sent to incineration, and because the price to send that waste to incineration was actually higher than to send it to anaerobic digestion, they saved on disposal costs, and that was able to cover most of the costs of the infrastructure that they had invested on. And also, it's a clear example of circular economy because the collection vehicles are also powered by biomethane. Next slide. Another example, which I decided to bring, even if it's not about municipal solid waste, but I think it's a really great example of innovative financing for biogas, and this could be used for municipal solid waste, is from the city of Santa Fe in New Mexico. Which was the first city that was able to obtain certified green bonds to finance their wastewater, their CHP anaerobic digester CHP plant for their wastewater treatment plant. So how did this happen? In 2019, the city had adopted a sustainability mandate, and they were looking for projects that could deliver on that mandate. So they were going to change their antiquated wastewater treatment with anaerobic digestion, the CHP plant. And it was a very sustainable project because 94%, up to 94% of the operational energy needs of the plant were going to come from renewable energy with the combination of the CHP plant and solar panels that were already in the old wastewater plant. Initially, they were planning to finance it with just ordinary financing, but they actually had the idea of trying to obtain green bonds and financing in this other way at a conference, such as a conference like this one. Next. And so the city finance team decided to look into how they could do that, how the green bonds would work, and how they could become a certified green bond entity. And they had two options. They could self-certify, which was the lowest standards for green bonds. But the mayor, Alan Webber, decided to go for the highest standards, and that was through the Climate Bonds Initiative. So the Climate Bonds Initiative is an international not-for-profit that seeks to mobilize the $100 trillion bond market for climate change solutions. And the certification process included the intervention of a firm called Force Environment that had to verify that the project was indeed green, the numbers were right, and that the funds that they would earn were actually used for the CHP plant. The initiative was hugely successful and earned them $52 million of bids. $52 million of bids for $13.5 million issuance, and $1.1 million came from local investors. And I think important here is that a lot of the investors were pointing to the fact that the green nature of the investment was the reason to bid. Next slide. So this is how two cities have managed to bring about really successful biogas projects and divert organic waste. But many other projects are not being as successful, and national governments have a big role to play in making that obvious, in overcoming those barriers and making these projects bankable. So I'm not going to go into all the different policies that they could put in place to make that possible. But you can see that there's a role for national and international policy, but also it's important that there is policies in place to make sure that the feedstocks is collected and diverted, and also that there is a market for the products of anaerobic digestion, so a market for the biogas and also for the biofertilizer digestate. That needs to be a quality product. So yeah, I won't keep you any longer. I think I probably went over a bit, but thank you for your attention, and I'm sure the slides will be shared. And for any questions on these policy recommendations, you have my contact details in the next slide. So yeah, do reach out. Thank you.
So thank you, Giulia. Thank you to all of our panelists for talking about innovative policy and financing mechanisms to transform the waste sector. And thank you all for staying a little bit late. We know we went over, and apologies for not having time for a panel discussion. I hope that the panelists can stick around for a few minutes to answer any remaining questions that you might have. Have a great coffee break.